Hi, Zeta. Hi, drunk Zorak. I think you're new. doing a bit of a new thing today. I'm gonna try and do like an art class. Some folks in another streamer's chat have given me a list of things that they want help on. Ah, yes. The people in Dawn's chat have given me a list of things that they want help on in regards to art, and I'm going to try and assist. Sound good? I want to give everyone the opportunity to join when they can, because this one will be very audience participation-y. Yeah. I know where you came from, Zeta. Hey Flair, good to see that you can make it. Also, as you can see, this is the new model. I made it a little while ago, and this is the first time I've gotten a chance to bring it out. It is cold, Zorak. It is. Yep, it's the one that I posted in the server a while back. I think you saw the process of me building the thing. You're just watching it slowly come to life, I think. Or that could have been someone else, I don't know. It's my most complicated model yet, even though it looks quite simple. I'll give y'all first dibs on what we talk about today. I've got a list already, but if there's one that I want to prioritize the people that could show up. You know? The current list is proportions, perspective, shading, consistency, and color. But if there's anything else you wanna know about, I can try and help. Can't guarantee perfection, because I'm still learning, but do my best. How do you get the motivation to do art? That's hard. Proportions first? Alright, yeah, we can do that. Motivation. Something that will help with the motivation is you can't force it, because forcing it is the fastest way to burn out, and burnout is not healthy. But something that will help train your artistic discipline, which can supplement it, is that you draw something small every day. And doing at least one thing every day will get you into the habit of drawing something every day, and that will that's discipline and habit forming. Someone took your actual name? Oh. How'd they manage that? Oh. Oh, you're glacy. Oh no. That sucks. This is kind of why I never play around with my names. Alright, you can be lurky, it's just... This will definitely go up as, like, a VOD, if I can help it. If I can figure out how to save the stream, I'll put it up on my YouTube so people can come back and watch it whenever. It's been about 10 minutes. I think we can get going. Okay. And we're going to start off with proportions, because proportions are fun and also annoying. Okay. So the basics of like the human body is the head. The head generally is what people like to draw first, and everybody has a head. It's like not everybody has an arm or leg, but they've all got heads. And that is the basis for your proportions. I'm going to start with a straight line just because it makes it easier to draw straight. But what you need to know is that roughly the average human body is 7.5 heads tall. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. This is for a relatively accurate human body. When you're getting into stylization, you shift the proportions a lot. Of course. And right around here, this is where your rib cage is, starting from your 2 and going down to your 3. And then right around here is where your pelvis is. It's where your hips and stuff go. The bottom of your pelvis is your halfway mark on the body. Roughly. Hey, Glacy got their name back. Halfway between the hips and the ground, right around here, is where you're going to put your knees. This isn't completely perfect because this is all from memory of my high school or my college proportion class, and it's been about a month, but yeah. And of course, up here is where your collarbones go. I haven't quite figured out the perfect proportions for your shoulders, but or like how wide they need to be. I kind of eyeball it, but generally you can see the ribs here. I've drawn this little upside down V shape. Right around that basically just imitates the general shape of the ribs. It starts roughly halfway through the ribs and then goes down. From where this edge of the ribs are, you bring your shoulders down, and that's where your elbow sits when your arms are not doing anything. And then your forearm goes down to the bottom of your pelvis, and your hands extend a little bit further. This is roughly the proportion of a general human body. From here, we can build out the form. Then draw the head. And from your neck, it comes down to where the dip in your it's the clavicle, the collarbone. We've all got a notch in our collarbone where they meet, and it's roughly around here at the ribs. And we have muscles connecting. Huh? What just happened? There was a thing and I didn't see it. What? Oh! Thank you for the follow. An art software for beginners. There is a free software called Metabang Paint Pro. It should be free. It is good for beginners, but is kind of basic overall. But if you want to learn general how to navigate art programs, that's a good place to start. Okay, so from roughly the chin, or just wherever looks generally correct, you bring muscles out to the shoulders. From the top of that upside down V shape from the ribs, you can pull out some muscles. This here is your pecs. And yeah, Autodesk Sketchbook and Ibis Paint are also good for beginners if you want to start on mobile. Metabang Paint Pro is a PC only kind of thing, I believe. I haven't used it in a long time. If you're curious about the software I'm using Clip Studio Paint, which is paid but very good. I like it. I've used it for years. It's what I do all my work on for the most part. But back to art things. From the shoulders, we have this muscle right here. I typically draw them kind of small, according to my professor last year, but that's because I don't like drawing them big. It's a little bit weird to me. I don't like big muscles personally. And here we have our forearms. We can draw this tiny sort of trapezoidal shape. It's longer on the end here than it is here, just generally. And that's the basic forms of the arms. The muscles will contract in certain ways that make the shapes change based on how you hold them, but this is a good shorthand for me. And of course, we have our hips. And right here, from roughly where the pecs and the ribs end down to our pelvis, this is where the abs would be if I ever bothered to draw abs. You know, this is where they sit. Your belly button sits roughly right here. Roughly. This is kind of fuzzy, but yeah. We want to connect this skin from the ribs to our pelvis, our hips. A little bit like this. And from here, we build out the legs. I build out the legs with giant ovals. We like ovals in the human body. I like ovals in the human body. Not everybody does. Hopefully this is making sense to y'all. If you got questions, feel free to ask, man. And contrary to popular belief, kneecaps are really big. They're roughly the width of your head. Very large. Or at least that's what I think they're about. They're very large, and we usually tend to make them small. And we have our calves and shins. I like to use the same shapes that I use with the arm most of the time. You'll realize that legs sometimes look like this. And sometimes they look like this, depending on which direction you're facing. So handle your shapes with a grain of salt because legs are complicated. With feet, the nice shorthand is a circle for the heel, or an oval for the heel in perspective. I'm using a drawing tablet, by the way. On the ground where the heel would be, and then kind of an awkward shaped cone. And you extend with the toes. Just a little bit. I use a Wacom Intuos. It's not a screen tablet. It's just one of those simple black ones, because I like it that way. But some people like their screen tablets, and those are a lot more expensive. I will say that if you get a tablet like mine, I'd say that the learning curve might be a bit steeper. Now, of course, this guy looks super stiff because I did not bother to think at all about how he was standing when I was sketching, but yeah. Yeah. With mine, I have my tablet off to the side while I'm staring at my screen, and I've used it for years, so I have the muscle memory to get it to work. But it took me a long time to actually put in the effort to learn how to use it. With the more cartoony styles, you want a bigger head, and sometimes they like having longer legs. It really depends. You can play around with the proportions however you want. This is just general stuff. I'm going to clean this up real quick, just so that it's less of a hazy mess of lines. You can always adjust things as you like, based on if it looks off. Train your eyes, train your mind. Something to remember with the feet is that they have arches. I don't always draw them because I'm lazy. And here is our generally finished human body. Remember, 7.5 is a good starting point for your proportions. 7.5 heads. You can use an OSU tablet as like a regular art tablet too. It works fine. Because I think they start as art tablets and you just use it for the precision. Oh yeah, that's fine. You gotta learn to keep the pen off of the tablet if you want to draw, because of course the moment you put the pen down, you're making marks. I'm just going to draw like a quick shirt on our person. Because why not? This is pretty chill. This typically takes a lot longer to do in a regular drawing because you're planning stuff out a lot more. I'm kind of winging it. But, no biggie. A lot of times with tighter clothing, you can leave a small impression of what is underneath. With skin tight clothing, you can almost draw the body just fine and just cover it with whatever, but the baggier clothing, it obfuscates the form. And that is our human body. Let's see what was next on the list. I guess we can do coloring. This isn't a very detailed anything, but with digital art, you can always, you gotta remember, nothing is permanent, ever. You can always change it, even if you don't want to. So when you're picking colors, you do not have to go with the first ones you pick. Because half the time, they're bad. Not an insult to anyone. It's just first ideas are sometimes kind of bad. And it's okay to work with it if it doesn't look right. There's a lot of tools that you can use to fix it. Generally, I like my base colors to be analogous, which are next to each other on this color wheel here, like red, orange, yellow, that kind of thing. Those are analogous, they sit next to each other. It's like green and blue and yellow. Those are also analogous. Color theory, fun shit. If you've ever taken an art class, you've already heard the color wheel spiel. Everyone has always heard of it. This is basic stuff, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Generally, I like analogous as your main palette. Like, this guy's hair is going to be red. Therefore, I'll probably put an orange or a yellow somewhere else on him. Maybe like his shirt. With the more detailed characters, you have more chances to use different colors, but be sparing. If you use too many colors on one character, it gets ugly really quick. It gets overwhelming and also hard to draw. If you intend to draw a character a bunch of times, limit your color palette and just general level of detail. It makes your life so much easier. You don't have to, of course. You can do whatever you want. It's your art. It's just a general piece of advice. Something else you need to worry about with color theory is values. That refers to how light and dark your colors are. Like, I'll show you in a second. Once I'm done with this final bit. Just go with that color. As you can see, these are colorful, but underneath all of that, they're also light and dark. Let's go ahead. As you can see, this is what they look like without any of their actual color. That color we call hue and saturation. This is what these same colors look like with their saturation set to 0. They're still very different from each other because of how their values are. Different colors look different naturally, even if they're technically the same. Is it? I don't. Saturation is generally. I set it to color. It's exactly the same. Don't. It's okay. But yeah. Here's a picture of color wheel. These are our basic colors. As you can see, even in their base forms, they're not the same. This blue will always be darker than this yellow. And managing these values is important in character design in general, because if it's all the same color, it makes your eyes hurt. Or it's not very interesting. Like, I could, let's say, I make his skin brown. And then I make that shirt this meh blue. Aside from his hair, he looks exactly the same in all the places. That's not very visually interesting. Just in general. It's good to have some variety. Like this. You can make him out much easier overall. In humans, we see value before we see color. So when things are the same value, it looks weird. Just generally. This is my understanding of how color works. You can use this however you like, but now we get to move on. Someone asked me about shading. For me, one of the biggest things with shading is understanding the form of the object that you're trying to shade. Because everything is made up of 3D shapes. And 3D shapes are annoying. Like, with this sphere, with a sphere, I'm going to draw it, we have line going down the middle, it's curved, we have this. In the other middle, as you can see, it's 3D. 3D shapes are annoying. You have to think about the direction your light is coming from, and that's like the biggest no shit moment you could ever have. But as you can see, we've got like a medium gray for this sphere. Your light, say it's coming from here, and your thing is made up of circles. You're now thinking of your sphere like this. Your light hits directly here, it will be the brightest spot. Over here, there is no light because it is blocked. And that means that this is how our shadows will follow the form. This is the most basic kind of shading you can have. This is cell shading, it's not blended at all. I could blend it, but yeah. The more steps in your shading, the more detailed and generally realistic you'll get. But as you can see, this looks a lot more 3D than when it didn't have any shading at all. Shading changes a lot about how your shape looks. And it's important to pay attention to that. It's like shadows are the absence of light. Say I have a janky cube. And again, our light is here. We're just going to shade the edges of this because it looks weird. And then because it hits on this side of the cube, and this box cannot be seen through, it's not transparent at all, no light on this side of the box. Because the light continually hits the box, behind it, there's a shape. That's your shadow. And based on the angle of the light, because it's coming from here, it's going to stretch out like this. Hi, useless. Class is in session. We're talking about shading. Riveting stuff in it. This is the basics of understanding shading on a deeper level, other than the light is on one side and the dark is on the other. You gotta think about the underlying forms. It's like, now that we've done this, you get the basic idea of how light and shadow are unhappy with each other. They typically stick on opposite sides until you have multiple light sources, and that's a pain in the butt. But in this arm, we have like a sphere connected to a cylinder, connected to, let's say, in a long sphere, like a rounded cylinder. And let's say the light is on this side. As you can see, generally, we want the light over here. And because these objects are rounded, the light gets softer instead of cutting off harshly like with the cube. So we generally show that with a gradient or just generally easing up on the light. The further away an object is from the light, the less light it has. No shit. And from here, we have our shadows. So on this other side, because yes, that is exactly what I just explained. Hopefully, you can see what I'm getting at here. We're applying this same principle of shading the 3D object to our object made of a lot of shapes. This is the basis of shading. This harsh shading that you see on the sphere and on these shapes here, this is called cell shading. It's using harsh lines to dictate your shapes. We can also use soft shading, which is much more blended and such. Let me get my blend. Like this. This is much smoother, obviously. And while it can make your shapes look even more realistic, without understanding the underlying forms, they'll just look like shit. Yeah? Because you have to understand form before you do any of the fancy stuff. So, we're going to set this to multiply and pick like this purple color and decide where's our light coming from. I'm going to say our light is coming from this direction. So all of our shadows are going to generally be over here. But of course, remember, if something is in front of another thing, the thing behind it is also in shadow. You can bend the rules if you decide to be extra stylistic about it, but generally, this is the key to nice shading that is pleasing to your eye. You can simplify it however you like, because you don't need to be absolutely pixel perfect about it if you don't want to. You just have to get the point across. Think about it less like a lot of the newbies that I've taught, I've helped, toured, whatever word you want to use. They're afraid to overshadow your thing. Do not be afraid to put your stuff in shadow. Because shadows are everywhere. And when you don't put enough shadows on, it looks flat. And we don't want flat. A lot of this is also generally figured out over time with practice. That's fine. You will not get it on your first try, because a lot of this has to do with intuition. It's easier to understand if you have references from real life that you can look at to as like a basis, but of course I'm lazy and usually don't practice what I preach. So I'm not going to begrudge anyone who just chooses not to, because it's too much work. I have not gone into fabric folds, so we're going to ignore it for now. These cartoon whatevers. Yeah, with darker shading, it's a lot more dramatic. And that darker shading implies harsher light, usually. If, like, the darker this is, the stronger the light looks because of contrast. But if I have less shading, then, or if my shading is lighter, then there's either a lot of light around, like a lot in every direction, or there's just kind of There's not a very strong light to begin with, and that, I go for something generally middling with my harsh light. And of course, we're going to draw the light on, because shading is not only shadows. Always, always, always remember that. A lot of newbies forget to draw the light. And of course, with shading and lighting, you can build out your forms a lot more than you could otherwise. And you can bring texture to your otherwise rather flat looking drawing. Because texture is very important, or shadows are very important on how to convey texture. Because the more textured something is, the more complex your shadows generally have to be to match it. You'll find that this is one of the biggest parts that people do very differently. Because it all has to do with interpretation a lot. But yeah. Now we have a thing. Normally, light and shadow do not cross like I've done here, but I like doing it anyway because I can. That's purely a stylistic thing for me. Something else I like to do, just purely for me, is I highly enjoy just throwing a big ol' airbrush all over everything because it's nice. It's purely a me thing. And if you know how to use airbrush correctly, then you can get a lot of good out of it. Just going to finish this up and we can move on. Layering your light and your shadows is fun. Or at least fun for me. I always think it's the fun part. But here we are. We have done a thing. Alright. What else was on our list? We had proportions, we did. Shading, we did. We did some good, some basic color. Now we've got perspective and consistency, which generally go hand in hand. We get to do something supremely boring now because we're doing perspective next. One of the first things that they teach you in like a basic high school art class is something called point perspective. I personally hate it because I've seen it a million times, but it's important anyway. This here is point perspective. This line is called your horizon line. You see it whenever you look off into the distance and the sky meets the land and everything smushes into nothingness, like right there. This dot here is where everything in your field of vision extends from. As you can see here. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's the point. It's the dot, it's the midpoint or whatever. This thing, important. Horizon line is also important depending on where you establish that in a scene. This is very important for landscapes. If your character is floating in a void, this will be hard to use. This is generally for background work. As you can see, anything below the horizon line, you can see the top of because it's below you. This horizon line is your line of vision. It is where your eyes are. If you have a low horizon line, most stuff is going to be above you. If you have a high horizon line, most stuff is going to be below you. You can see the tops of everything below the horizon line and the bottoms of everything above it. Anything that intercepts the horizon line, like right here, it's at eye level and you see neither. There are multiple kinds of point perspective. This is called one point perspective because it extends from a singular point. And that means everything is generally coming at you. Coming straight from the middle out. The other kinds of point perspective that are most common are 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point. As you can see, 2 point starts with 2 points, and where they intersect is where your edges are. This is when you're looking at things from angles instead of straight on, like right here. You can see the corners of stuff. You could theoretically consider this 2 point if you drew where the other point was coming from, but generally we don't bother with this perspective because it's a pain. Let's be real here. We don't care. And the important distinction between 1 point and 2 point is that with 1 point, you can draw the flat edges of stuff and recede them into the background. With 2 point, there are no flat. There's no basic shape. They're all in perspective. Three point is like 2 point, but instead of just this side and this side, you have this side, and extending up or down. We don't use 3 point a whole lot in the basic classes because it's just a lot of things to pay attention to, and it's a lot of work. However, yeah, railroad tracks are a pretty easy way to do this. They're pretty common use for point perspective. Generally, how you lay these out, you figure out where your horizon line is. We're gonna say our points are here. With 1 and 2 point, your points are on the horizon line. With 3 point, it's not. And then you draw lines from all the points to where they connect, like this. And then, all of a sudden, you have a shape. With more organic backgrounds, this is harder to use because they don't follow the basic stuff. They're more organic in shape, like trees, but this is especially helpful when drawing stuff like cityscapes and things. Very important. This is point perspective in its most basic form, but once you get the gist of how to connect the lines for stuff like cubes and stuff, you can then go into things like cylinders in space. It's like, let's draw another box. Because why not? This also has a good bit to do with geometry things, but we're not doing math, because math sucks. With cylinders, you can realize that from one side, they look like a rectangle, because if you're looking at them straight on. From the other, they're a circle. We're going to draw a circle here in perspective with the box, because we're going to make at least 1 point touch the edge of the box in each thing. Because you can always fit a circle inside of a square. This is roughly how you do it. And then you extend upwards. This is very, very rough, but I believe you get the point. And of course, we have our theoretical thing here. You now have a cylinder in space. Knowing that, you can also put them like this. Very, very rough explanation of this kind of thing. Something that someone asked me to cover is consistency, which unfortunately is not that easy. Most of it comes with lots and lots of drawing the same thing over and over again, building muscle memory. I've drawn this character 1,000,000 times. I'm pretty sure I could do it in my sleep. I have a method to do it. The faster you go, the less accurate it will be, but I know a couple of little tricks to help. And a lot of these come from the animation industry. If you've ever seen something called a character turnaround, it looks a little bit like this, but with more angles. You can see these lines here that extend across, and these are the visual landmarks of the body. You can see there's one at the chin, and they extend across, and no matter what, that will always be where the chin is in this turnaround, because the character's not changing pose or position or anything. It's exactly the same, just in a different perspective from a different angle. And landmarking these important places, important landmarks like this, can help you get a consistent size with your stuff. And when you landmark like this, you can see before you draw it that this leg will always go from here to here, this part of the leg. So you won't draw it too large, and then it won't look wonky. Or you will with practice, because it'll still come out looking a little bit off, just naturally. Well, everything takes practice. Something that also helps is, again, using shapes during construction to build the body. Using a circle as the start of your head, and then drawing it looking in some other direction. You can still see that generally it's easier to make consistent. Form is incredibly important to art. can do this with a number of shapes, just generally in different parts of the body, but it does help a lot. When I'm lazy, I just like to do weird 2D shapes because these are shapes I've used for a long time. But if you really want to keep things consistent, use underlying shapes during your construction sketches before you ever migrate to the shorthand of the 2D. As you progress in your art journey, you may want to shy away from the simple shapes once you've gotten the hang of it and move on to more complex ones once you're sure that you've understood the general aspect of using 3D in your stuff. If anybody has any questions, we have time to cover them because I believe that was the last on our pre-made list of things to learn. Recommended kinds of brushes to use. That really depends on style. I personally prefer these chunkier brushes for my line art just as a stylistic choice, but for a lot of people, using a regular old round one like this does them just fine. I like using this fuzzy airbrush thing for my shading and shading alone, sometimes gradients for color things. I would say if you can help it, never shade only with an airbrush unless you are really, really good at it. I don't use a whole lot of different brushes in my own art, personally. I just pick a line art brush that I think is stimmy. If it's chunky, it's fun. If it's not chunky, it's clean and fresh and whatever. There's stuff like this one, which is extra super duper chunky, and that's fun for like sketching and stuff. But it's ultimately up to you what you decide to use, because everybody's thing is different. Something that I do recommend for me personally is that when you're doing line art, close your shapes. You see that there's huge gaps in this? If I tried to use the fill tool to color things right now, I would get scribbles everywhere. I'd get color and it would look bad. It would do the MS Paint thing that everybody hates. When you close your line art, you can use the fill tool, and that takes hours away from your coloring. You saw earlier that I was coloring with I was coloring like this. And that's really slow, and it takes up a lot of time when you could just, like, you just do that. It's much easier. I personally like to close the line art. For some people, it's a stylistic choice, and different programs handle the fill tool differently. So for me, it's easier because Clip Studio Paint is great. For others, like Photoshop, it might be more annoying to deal with. It's up to you, but it saves time if you can help it. A lot of animators must close their lines because ain't nobody got time to color all that. Layer and clipping effects. Okay. So, there's a thing called a clipping mask, or a clipping layer, or if you've got a really basic program, it's called Alpha Lock, which is slightly different, but ultimately does the same thing. We have, let's say, circle. We're going to fill in this circle. Oops. That was purely because I wasn't paying attention. A clipping layer. I will move myself out the way because my face is, in fact, in the way of seeing all the important things on that side. Over here in this little area, there's buttons that you call a clipping mask. What a clipping mask does is, you see the shape with a clipping mask on top of it, I cannot draw outside of the lines at all. Physically impossible. I couldn't even if I wanted to. I'd have to make another layer or turn the clipping mask off if I wanted to draw outside of the lines at all. As you can see, scribbling everywhere. Clipping masks are godsends when you want to do shading. I was using them earlier when I was shading the little dude. I could show you what that looks like when they're not clipped, because I guarantee you it's a mess. They're all locked to the shape of the little guy. And someone also asked about blending modes, layer effects, that kind of thing. You'll see this little drop-down menu where it says normal. That is a menu of all the different effects that you can put on a single layer. These effects do drastically different things. With multiply, as you can see, it's making things darker, like shadows. It is the go-to shading blending mode if you don't feel like experimenting at all. And then there's stuff like add, which is meant to convey light. It's meant to make things glowy and bright and happy and whatever. It's add. It's got, the names are strange, but it's got to do with how light works. Hi Dawn, you're okay. I'm going to save this and put it up later if I can figure out how. So that anybody who wants to see it can. But we're going over blending modes and stuff. Add typically means to make brighter. Subtract typically means to make darker. So does multiply. It's all very complicated and I don't entirely understand it, but generally that's what it means. Something about overlay. With overlay, the closer you are to the middle, the less you can see, the less effect it has. So, if you want things lighter, you've got to be brighter than the middle. If you want things darker, darker than the middle. Obviously. What's up, Glacy? What you need? We're going over shading tactics on digital art, specifically pertaining to layers. Yes. A copy of the notes will be provided later, don't worry. Something to know is that blending modes mess with each other. You can layer them over top of each other in different ways, and they will look weird. Like, say, I have this. I have an add on top of a multiply, and I am going to switch the order. I'm going to put multiply on top. So you can see that has changed how things look, because one is acting on top of the other. This is very important when you start developing your own style, because the way you layer these modes has drastically different effects on itself. Let's say let's do another one. Let's go with hard light, stick it on this. What the heck? As you can see, hard light is on top of add. If we raise add to be on top of hard light is now acting based on the colors underneath it. All blending modes are based on the thing underneath it. It cannot act on a layer that is above it. It's a hierarchy of color. Blow dodge. Okay. It's very strong. But it's fun nonetheless to play around with them all. You can use whatever you want to your heart's content, and a lot of the time it takes a lot of experimentation to see which ones gel with you. I personally like the add, multiply, and overlay layers as my go-tos, but I'll be known to experiment with a few if I'm going out the box to get a very specific effect. And of course, colors interact in fun ways when you're messing with these. Like how this purple starts turning kind of red. If I stick stuff on it. Yeah, most of the experience is just messing around, doing studies, just playing around, doing what you like until you've got a good feel for it. And that's what the building up of muscle memory generally is about. It's just messing around until something feels good and you can replicate it. However, we all just vibing. Anything else? Been going for about an hour and a half. Exporting files. Okay. Most of the time, when you're ready to save your drawing, there's a couple ways that you need to pay attention to. Most programs have something called, well, it's like their native file. It's like Photoshop has a PSD file, a .psd, and Clip Studio Paint has a clip file. These are files that save all of your layers, and can be used to reopen the file exactly as it was as you were working on it. This is important for big projects, and just generally I recommend saving at least one of these per drawing, no matter what, because you never know when you need that. Go back and reference your drawings and stuff. Then there are other things. The thing about the layer files is most of the time you cannot export, you can't use them when you're like posting art. It's like if you put it in Discord, you wouldn't get an image, you'd get a file. And that would be, other people can't use this file. And so we have others. We have the ever lovely PNG and JPEG. JPEG compresses your image down into one layer, just like PNG, except with JPEG, it will also make the size of your drawing smaller by compressing pixels and colors, and it will make your drawing look fuzzy. If you don't want that, always save in a PNG. It is the one layer with the best quality because it's not compressing. You know how you zoom into a JPEG and then all of a sudden the colors around lines look really weird? PNG does not do that, so it is my go-to recommendation for when you want to share your art online. The only problem is that PNGs are bigger than JPEGs. So if you have a really large image, it'll take up a lot of space, and some websites are space limited. If you need to worry about space, like say for Discord's stupid byte limit, then you want a JPEG. You just have to keep an eye on mitigating your compression too bad. The other thing about PNGs, JPEGs cannot handle transparency at all. Just don't bother. PNGs are your go-to for transparent files. Do not try anything else, man. Because otherwise they'll get like a black background to it or something that they automatically import in because the file type cannot manage it. So yeah, when you want to save to work on later, you've got PSD or clip or whichever native file your program supports. Usually it's the first option that it tries to give you when you're saving your file. It's like the default most of the time. And the PNGs and JPEGs are your usual options when you're saving to share your art when you're done. Yeah. Crash course on digital art. Yep. I believe we've just about run out of stuff to talk about. Because we've hit starting your drawing with general proportions and construction, and then we went into 3D and shading rules with perspective stuff. And we did a little bit of color things with values. So I think if nobody else has questions, I will answer them if you do, but if you don't, we can go ahead and call it a night and say today was fairly successful. Hopefully this has helped y'all just a little bit. I mean, this is relatively fundamental stuff, but it's good theory work. Good for mental things. Yeah, most of the stuff you've heard today, aside from the digital specific things, is like 101 for the high school art courses, and it's like the first thing they teach you. But not everybody here has taken these courses, so I figured it was good to share anyway. Because knowledge should be able to be accessed. Why don't I find someone to raid? Oh yeah. If ever you need help, YouTube is your friend. There's a million shit on YouTube and other free art resources. Many people make like little images that are just little instructional art pictures. That you can usually find like somewhere on DeviantArt, or there's just like a million tools to help you for specific things. Cumulo is my good friend and fellow artist, so they definitely know what they're talking about when they're giving advice in the chat. Alright. Let's see if anybody's streaming at this time. Figure out raid. Oh. The video game awards are apparently going on. I didn't know that. What is this guy doing? This looks like this person is making or designing a VTuber model, which I think y'all might find a little interesting. What do you think? They're called Ryasan. And their model is actually really pretty. Their art style is nice. Alright, let's get that countdown going. I'll see y'all later. Thank you for showing up and being attentive. Bye.